Hey there everybody, Hongos here. Sounds like mangoes. Today I'm going to teach you how to get the most out of your Sony Hi8 or camcorder. Now some of these rules, they're going to surprise you. And that's because you've been taught photography and filmmaking a particular way, but the Hi8 breaks all those rules. I'm going to start off with something that I never thought I would say, which is use the camera's internal audio. We're always told to record audio separately, but what I love about the Hi8s is that they capture this very crispy, very broken audio that we're all used to. If you were born in like 1995 to 2010, the audio wasn't perfect. There's like this nice crispy toneness to it. And people's voices just sound so different, soothing and warm, yet very broken up. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Recording. Is this recording? Oh God, I look insanely yellow. And with that, you should also try to get to know every single feature about your camera. And that means the lens. So for my lens, it is a fixed 50mm focal length. And this means that I had to zoom in and zoom out with my feet, which is a very common rule if you're used to prime lenses. And what we are told oftentimes currently is to always shoot wide. Shoot wide because you can crop in and post, and because of the 4K, you won't lose the quality. However, the Hi8 is the exception to the rule, which is shoot tighter than you need to. Always shoot tighter. The camera does not struggle with close-ups. It actually struggles with the wide, and this is super difficult for me to break as a habit because I just like shooting wide. And wide can mean a variety of things, right? But you'll know it because you can kind of start to see the quality diminish. What I noticed with my particular camera was that there were two buttons to zoom in, wide and tight. The lever was a little bit more bumpy as you tried to zoom in and out. But with the buttons here on the side, it actually gave it a smoother transition, and it just made things look more flowy, easier on the eyes, as they say. Keep the camera really steady as you possibly can. Put it on a tripod like right here, because as much as back in the day they tried to claim that there was in-body image stabilization, there's no in-body image stabilization. It's all very tricky. It's not great. People really see the wobble, even if you're trying to hold it as tight as possible. If you are holding it, shoulders in, keep the camera steady, and look through it through the screen. Speaking of the screens on this aren't that great. So if yours does have a viewfinder like this, really try to cover it up as much as possible and block out the sun. This is also very important. Use all of the features that the camera has built into it. You know how our phones kind of have like all these gimmicky tricks like portrait mode and different filters? We'll definitely use the ones that are in this one because I just think they look the most fun, the most natural. The built-in fade effect. I don't know what was up with them back in the day, but just a lot of fades in between. And get creative with the fades. Line things up, lighten up like a person and a little animal, and transition in and out, and really align stuff up. Play around with the composition because that's what it's all about. The composition with the Hi8 becomes so important. You're shooting in a 4:3 aspect ratio or 3:4, I don't know. We're not getting hyper technical here. Chillax. Play around with that aspect ratio because it just changes so many things in the way that the frame looks, the way that you're trying to communicate to the audience your own perspective. So really move around things. It's different. It's not this nice screen that we have anymore. This also goes into don't use manual mode. Let the camera breathe. Let the camera do its thing. If you try to fiddle around with it, you try to control every single exposure, you're just gonna feel like you're using a big chunk of metal, right? And that's not what we're trying to do here. Let the camera, if it's moving and it's panning and it looks like it's about to overexpose, in that lens flare, we're gonna talk about the lens flare because it's my channel. Let the camera do it. If it's transitioning, I love the roll-off. The roll-off is just really nice, and I think it does a better job as it looks like to our eyes, right? Speaking of those lens flares, we gotta get into the lens flares. It's there, they're there. They're gonna be huge, they're gonna be massive. It's gonna look like there's so many flaws to the camera, right? And that's the pull. That's the pull with these things. Everyone's trying to fix the chromatic aberration. It's important, but they're trying to fix that. They're trying to make sure that lens flares aren't as visible. But to me, I think that the lens flares on this are probably one of its strongest features. I just want to talk a little bit about night shooting because the film that's on here, I don't think it's pushed beyond like 800 or 400, which means that shooting at night is difficult, and depending on how well the light here or the light on your camera is, it's not gonna be very powerful. This is when you wanna get yourself a little aperture light, so that way it's always ready in your pocket and you can shoot at night, because you just don't wanna push it to extremes. And the footage on here, you can't crop in, unfortunately. When you're in post, it's just like not even an option. Don't try it. The footage is sadly not as salvageable as we would like it to be. And speaking of film, choose the film wisely. Choose the one that's gonna be the most optimal for your experience. Personally, I go with the Hi8 film. This one right here, I don't remember the name. It's a stylistic choice, and I personally go with the one that really resonates the most with me. And as you're really establishing that scene and you're, getting ready to film and to shoot, typically, I let the camera run for 5 seconds before I start. But unfortunately, when you're in post, I personally use the rate stretch tool. Unfortunately, due to the low frame rates on these cameras, you can't stretch it out as much as you would like to. I needed to actually let the camera run just a little bit longer in case I needed to stretch out the footage in post. And that's unfortunately just a limitation. Another little nice trick as well when you're framing and composing the shot is taking out your phone, setting up the composition as best as you can. And the iPhone's really great because you can move around the wheel and it will actually give you a focal length right next to the wheel. So if you move around just 2 little lines, you're actually at 50 millimeters. This will not only save you film, but also the headache of like trying to move around the camera, right? Right here, we're gonna try to frame it as best as we possibly can. So this is the composition right here. Just kind of based on that, I'm gonna try and replicate it as best as possible, but also taking into consideration how little detail this has, right? So I always just want to be on the safe side of the camera. Going over to when you are editing, don't push the footage so much. Allow the footage to breathe as much as possible and let it roll authentically. The reason that we decided to go into the Hi8 game is not to manipulate the image even further, but to see it as it is. Pushing the footage in its exposure, in its highlights, completely fine, but let it breathe, let it be there. Really, the Hi8, I think, is the most authentic version that I found of capturing the footage and being in the moment. And that's why I really hope that one day Sony will revive these bad boys in a more modern way. I wish this thing had USB-C. So with that, I hope that you've gotten something out of this video. I hope that you go out there and shoot something that feels authentic to who you are. But as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I would super appreciate it, as I'm very close to being monetized. But as always, remember, reality isn't made out of matter, but what matters.